Boo. Did I get you? As you can see, I have once again donned the Internet Horror t-shirt. Link in description. If I see one comment asking where I got this, I'm stealing something out of your house. Which means it's time to strap in for another spooky video.
Did you see it? On the left side of the doorframe.
We're talking about analog horror today, as you probably already knew from the title. What's analog horror? Probably not very many of you are asking. For the 5 people watching this video who are not chronically online, analog horror is a subgenre of horror that has become popular on the internet, primarily here on YouTube, throughout the 2010s and early 2020s. It's a style of horror storytelling that I've become particularly fascinated by over the past few years, especially its rise to prominence in pop culture. It started out as something fairly niche and went on to influence some of the horror films coming out of Hollywood today. However, I've been noticing a rising sentiment lately that analog horror is dead or over. I want to trace analog horror's ascent and investigate how true these claims of its downfall really are. But first, do you know what's scarier than any horror web series or movie I've ever seen? Data breaches. The internet is full of data brokers who collect personal information about you, like your name, age, address, and contact info, and sell it to spammers, scammers, and stalkers. Unfortunately, nowadays there's really no way to use the internet without sites like Google or Meta harvesting your data. You shouldn't have to choose between going completely off-grid and living with Slenderman in the woods and giving up your privacy. And thanks to today's sponsor Aura, you no longer have to. Aura protects your privacy by identifying data brokers selling your info and automatically removing it from these sites and keeping it off. There are plenty of other services out there that claim to offer this too, but none of them offer as many features as Aura for the same price. With Aura, you get alerts whenever your info is found on the dark web, 24/7 credit monitoring, a secure VPN, antivirus and password manager, and more. Try Aura for free for 14 days at aura.com/randymoon. In those 2 weeks, Aura will get to work scrubbing your personal info off of these data broker sites so that the only scares you have to worry about come from the haunted SpongeBob SquarePants VHS tape in your basement. As many of you know, this channel has already been hacked once, so I'm not leaving myself vulnerable and neither should you. Thank you to Aura for sponsoring, and now back to the video. Of course, analog horror didn't just fall out of a coconut tree. It exists in the context of all in which it lives and what came before it. One of the main precursors of analog horror was the found footage film genre. Found footage is a style of filmmaking often used in horror in which the footage is presented as if it was recorded by the characters in the story and discovered, edited together, and presented to the audience by some third party. This can take several forms: a mockumentary, first-person handheld camera, recorded TV broadcast, CCTV footage, or screen recordings of a computer, phone, or other digital device. In other words, the camera is part of the film, as opposed to being a fourth wall like it is in most movies. Oftentimes, the film is presented to the audience as though the events depicted therein really happened. Several techniques may be employed to create this illusion of reality, including shaky camera work, naturalistic dialogue and acting, and improvisation. While there are non-horror found footage movies, this style is particularly effective within the horror genre because things tend to feel scarier if they seem more real. One of the earliest widely known examples of a found footage horror film is Cannibal Holocaust, released in 1980. It presents itself as footage recovered from a team of documentarians who disappeared in the Amazon rainforest while trying to make a film about cannibal tribes. The film, which remains highly controversial to this day, was apparently so convincing that many people thought it was a genuine snuff film. The film that popularized the genre, and is probably still the most synonymous with it, is 1999's The Blair Witch Project, which I have never seen. Go ahead and get mad at me for it in the comments, it drives up my engagement. It follows 3 students who head into the Appalachian Mountains to shoot a documentary about a local legend known as the Blair Witch, before going missing. The marketing campaign for the film promoted it as being a work of non-fiction. Missing posters for the actors were handed out at screenings, and a website featuring faux police reports and interviews garnered hundreds of millions of hits. And it was successful. Apparently so much so that actress Heather Donahue's mother received sympathy cards in the mail from people who actually believed her daughter had died. This has never really made sense to me because why would you believe that your local Cineplex is screening a real snuff film comprised of footage that should probably be in an evidence locker at, like, the FBI headquarters? But I don't know, I wasn't there. The Blair Witch Project ended up being a smash hit and made $100 million at the box office. This success, coupled with the fact that found footage is inherently pretty inexpensive and easy to shoot, led to a wave of found footage horror movies throughout the 2000s and 2010s, including Paranormal Activity, Wreck, VHS, Lake Mungo, Unfriended, and Spree, among many others. Another major influence on analog horror that is more specific to the internet is creepypastas. Surely most of you know what those are, but to the 0.6% of my audience who are 65 plus, creepypastas are like scary campfire stories or urban legends that are disseminated via the internet. They originated primarily on 4chan's Xboard in the 2000s and later became popular on other sites like Reddit and fandom.com. They often revolve around things like supernatural entities or monsters, lost or cursed media, frequently children's TV shows or video games, and murder. Some popular creepypastas that you may have heard of include Slenderman, Jeff the Killer, Ben Drowned, Sonic.exe, Smile Dog, the SCP Foundation, and the Backrooms. While originally conceived by one person, these creepypastas tend to sort of take on a life of their own and develop a collective mythos that is ever expanding thanks to a dedicated fandom. So what exactly makes something analog horror then? Well, analog horror is sort of like if found footage and creepypastas had a really fucked up baby. First, let's take a closer look at that word analog. In this case, it refers to the aesthetics of analog technology that are used within the genre. VHS degradation and CRT scanlines are the two big ones you'll see the most frequently, but things like cassette tape hiss or film photography might be used too. That being said, some projects that get lumped into the analog horror category don't really feature analog electronics at all. For instance, one series we're going to talk about in a moment is about a PlayStation 1 game. A CD-ROM based video game console is very much not analog technology, but the PS1 is from the same time period when a lot of analog technology like VHS was still in use, so it does have a similar vibe. Some people use another label to refer to these types of projects, digital horror, but plenty of series make use of both, so the distinction isn't really that clear-cut. Because of this analog aesthetic, analog horror series are often set in the past, or feature someone in the present day stumbling upon some older technology. The analog aesthetic serves a dual purpose here. Firstly, it's where a lot of the horror in analog horror comes from. While some analog horror series do feature the odd jump scare or gory imagery, most of them forego this in favor of cultivating an unsettling vibe and creating tension through ambiguity. Creators often use the lo-fi nature of analog technology to their advantage in this way, as it can obscure or abstract certain things and leave them up to viewer interpretation, playing on the fear of the unknown. The lo-fi aesthetic also makes the genre very accessible to amateur filmmakers and those working with little to no budget. No fancy equipment is required, and a VHS filter can easily mask the use of rudimentary special effects. Some of the most successful analog horror series were shot on iPhones, starred the creator and their friends, and were edited using free programs like Blender or DaVinci Resolve. In addition to aesthetic, analog horror can also be defined by its tropes. Content-wise, it tends to cover a lot of similar ground as creepypastas. Given the found footage aspect, it often focuses on media that has been corrupted, hijacked, cursed, or haunted in some way, and begins to affect the characters' real lives, as shown through audiovisual distortion or glitches. The media in question may be something that would ordinarily be innocuous, like a video game, children's cartoon, or TV weather report, but through editing, the creator makes it unfamiliar and thus sinister. The antagonists of analog horror series are usually supernatural, alien, or Lovecraftian in nature, as opposed to human. Other common themes include liminal spaces, childhood trauma, anomalous events, surrealism, unsolved murders or disappearances, government conspiracies or cover-ups, and lost media. There can sometimes be overlap between analog horror and ARGs, or alternate reality games, something I talked about in my video about the June archive that you probably haven't seen because nobody watched it. Basically, some analog horror series contain an audience participation aspect in which there are hidden clues, Easter eggs, or puzzles for the viewers to piece together to figure out what's going on in the story. Analog horror is usually episodic in nature, and since it's being made by very small teams or possibly even just one person, it can take a while for new episodes to come out, leaving plenty of time for fans to develop and exchange theories. Now, I want to sort of take you through a timeline of some of the major players on the analog horror scene over the years. This is by no means meant to be an exhaustive list of every analog horror series ever, so if I see any comments that are like, "Oh, how come you didn't talk about the fucking Bleebus logs?" I'm stealing two things out of your house. One of the first major proto-analog horror series on YouTube that I feel gets kind of overlooked nowadays is No Through Road. It consists of 4 short episodes uploaded between 2009 and 2012. Created by Stephen Chamberlain, who was only 17 at the time the first episode was made, it stars himself and his friends as a group of British lads who are out for a drive one night when they come across a tunnel marked by a sign that says No Through Road. They decide to turn back around and head back home until they realize they've passed the same road sign several times, seemingly trapped in an endless loop. Just when it seems like they have finally managed to break free, they find themselves transported back to the tunnel, where they are attacked by a masked man. 2 years later, the sole surviving member of the attack returns to the site of the incident to pay his respects, only for history to repeat itself. I'm not going to get too into plot synopsis or analysis for any of these series because I want you guys to go and watch them yourselves and support the creators if you're interested, but we can see what would end up being common analog horror tropes beginning to emerge here. No Through Road was shot on a digital camcorder, which, while not technically analog, does lend a certain lo-fi aesthetic to the footage. Stephen Chamberlain also makes use of visual and audio glitches to enhance the creepy atmosphere, and the series revolves around an anomalous and possibly supernatural event, being trapped in a time loop. Although the end of the series does hint towards certain things, much of it is left ambiguous, and even though the series is over 15 years old now, you can still see people crafting theories in the comments to this day. Analog horror creators often use the video descriptions to further the illusion that this was footage that they found, and this is exactly what Steven did, using them to imply that an unknown person acquired the footage from investigators and is releasing it to the public illegally. One thing No Through Road has received a lot of praise for is its realism. According to Steven, the first episode was a relatively spur-of-the-moment creation. He had just gotten a new camcorder, and his friend had just got his driver's license, so he and the boys were out for a drive one night when they came across the tunnel and its No Through Road sign, and remarked on its creepiness. An idea came to Stephen of being trapped in a time loop, passing the same sign over and over again, unable to escape. The majority of the episode was improvised and filmed in one night, with only minor prompts from Stephen. This, coupled with the fact that he and his friends were not professional actors by any means, lent the project an air of authenticity. Apparently so much so that iShowSpeed was convinced it was real when he watched it. This is the guy who set off fireworks in his own bedroom, though, so I guess I shouldn't be that surprised. There was initially no plan to turn No Through Road into a series until Stephen and his mates were home from university one summer and discussed continuing the story. They aimed to do so in a way that didn't overly complicate things, but was just complex enough that it didn't quite answer all of the questions. While there was more pre-planning for the last 3 episodes, they tried to maintain the unstructured and improvisational feel of the first one. The success of the series, which has a combined total of over 6 million views, actually inspired Stephen to pursue a career in the film industry, where he now works editing movie trailers. Marble Hornets is one of 2 analog horror series I'm going to talk about today that is directly inspired by a specific creepypasta, and in this case, that creepypasta is Slenderman. You may be familiar with him. The character originated on the Something Awful forums as a result of a Photoshop contest in 2009. Just 10 days later, the first episode of Marble Hornets was uploaded to YouTube by 3 film students, Troy Wagner, Joseph DeLage, and Tim Sutton. The series ran until 2014 with over 100 episodes and a few spin-offs, some of which are ongoing as of this year. It follows a college student named Jay who was given the tapes to an unfinished film project called Marble Hornets by his friend Alex, right before Alex abruptly disappeared from his life. Alex had suddenly ended the project early after his behavior became increasingly erratic and had planned to destroy the tapes. 3 years later, Jay is attempting to figure out just what happened during the production of the film. Upon watching the tapes, he discovers that Alex was being stalked by Slenderman, referred to as the Operator in this series. As Jay tries to get to the bottom of things, the Operator begins stalking him, leading him to set up cameras around his apartment. Slenderman then asks him to collect his 8 After Effects VHS overlays. No, I'm just kidding. Although for all I know that could be what happens, I have to admit I have not actually seen Marble Hornets, and I was not about to watch all 133 episodes for this video. YouTube does not pay me well enough for that. The series is presented as found footage of real events, both of Alex's film and Jay's surveillance cameras. There was also a significant ARG aspect to the series, with another YouTube channel called To The Ark, which would upload disturbing videos in response to Jay that included hidden messages and codes for the viewers to crack. Like No Through Road, Marble Hornets was an extremely low-budget amateur production, but it was well-received and wildly popular, becoming almost synonymous with the Slenderman character for many internet horror enthusiasts. It even garnered a shout-out from Roger Ebert. One of the reasons many have cited for it being such an effective horror series was that the operator physically appeared in the videos relatively rarely and seemingly at random, and his motives and abilities remained largely unexplained, again preying on the audience's fear of the unknown. As we will see, Marble Hornets was foundational for the many analog horror series that would follow it. It also inspired a video game, Slender the Arrival, released in 2013, and a feature film adaptation in 2015 called Always Watching, a Marble Hornet story. The movie was widely panned, however, for its approach to horror being more or less the opposite of what made the web series work so well. Fans of the original series criticized the movie for relying on cheap jump scares and failing to create the same tension-filled atmosphere. It did star Doug Jones as the operator, though, which is a great casting choice, I'll give them that. Although No Through Road, Marble Hornets, and other similar horror series from the late 2000s and early 2010s have retroactively been considered proto-analog horror, the term analog horror didn't really start to be used as a genre signifier until Local 58 was created in 2015. In fact, the term came directly from the channel's description: analog horror at 476 MHz. 476 MHz being a television broadcasting frequency. The creator behind Local 58 is Chris Straub, who is also known for creating the popular creepypasta Candle Cove and various other works of internet horror. The first 3 episodes were hosted on their own dedicated website until they were uploaded to YouTube in 2017, where all subsequent episodes have been posted. As of writing, there are 12 episodes in total, most of which are under 5 minutes long, with the most recent one having been uploaded about a year ago. Although Chris seems to like to upload new episodes around Halloween time, so this may already be outdated by the time I upload this. Unlike the 2 analog horror series we've talked about so far, Local 58 doesn't really have a plot or a story. It revolves around a public access TV station that broadcasts to Mason County, West Virginia. Each episode is a recording of a broadcast that happened at some point in the channel's 70-year history and was hijacked in some way. These broadcasts include everything from weather reports and emergency alerts to children's cartoons and late-night movies. Many of them feature the moon in some way, hinting toward it being some sort of malevolent entity. Probably the most famous and haunting episode, and in my opinion one of the scariest analog horror videos out there, is Contingency, in which the broadcast is interrupted by a message that declares that the United States has fallen to some unnamed adversary, and urges the American citizens to take their own lives in order to preserve the country's dignity, proclaiming that compliance will be enforced by law and that the message will repeat until there are none to read it. The broadcast then abruptly returns to normal, with the station claiming that the message was a hoax, although a second message can be faintly seen that suggests this was a real contingency plan put in place by the US government. As the series is still ongoing, there are a lot of questions that are still unanswered, but most popular theories have something to do with aliens invading and taking over Earth, and using the Local 58 station as a means to do so. However, comments from Chris on Reddit suggest that perhaps there is no overarching storyline or continuity to the series at all. Quote, "It feels like there's a lot of connective tissue because I'm making these to my own interests/aesthetic, and those elements have a lot in common. Stillness, distrust of safety warnings, misuse of mass perception, parallel science that arises from unexamined bad intent, dogmatic thought," end quote. Local 58 definitely does a great job of evoking the inherent terror of these themes. Real-life TV hijackings like the Max Headroom incident, or false emergency alerts like the 2018 Hawaii false missile alert, are still objects of fascination today due to the fear and uncertainty they inspired, and Local 58 is strongly reminiscent of these. If I had to choose one analog horror series that I thought was the most influential on the genre, it would definitely be this one, which we will see with some of the other series I'm going to talk about. Petscop is a little different from the other analog horror series we've discussed thus far because it's not technically analog. This is the series I mentioned at the beginning of the video that's about a PS1 game. While it would probably be more accurate to call it digital horror, it has enough in common with other analog horror series that it usually gets lumped in with them. It is also my personal favorite analog horror series, although that could just be the recency bias talking because I did just watch it for the first time for this video. It consists of 24 episodes that were uploaded from 2017 to 2019. Done in the style of a Let's Play, it follows a young man named Paul who has recently come into possession of a mysterious game called Petscop. Developed by the fictional company Garalina, it at first appears to be a simple puzzle game about collecting creatures known as pets. Strangely, the game appears to be unfinished until Paul inputs a cheat code he found on a note that came with the game. This opens up a new area that is a stark contrast to the bright and colorful area the game started in. Paul explores the game in an attempt to uncover its secrets, but the deeper he goes, the stranger it gets, to the point where it almost seems haunted. Eventually, it is revealed that Paul has been recording his playthrough not for the general public, but for a specific unseen person. Some recordings, however, seem to show things happening in the game without Paul playing it. Soon, it begins making references to people and events from Paul's real life, and he realizes that the game was meant to be played by one specific person who may have done something terrible. In order to preserve the illusion of reality, the creator of Petscop, Tony Domenico, didn't reveal himself until after the series had concluded, a tactic that clearly worked, as there was much debate about whether or not Petscop was a real game for the first few episodes of the series' run. In a way, it was real. Tony did actually develop a playable game in order to record the episodes, including composing an original soundtrack. He was inspired by the famous creepypasta Ben Drowned about a haunted copy of The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, and other analog horror series like Marble Hornets. The series' themes, which include childhood trauma, family, and rebirth, were inspired by the real-life case of Candace Newmaker, a 10-year-old girl who was killed during rebirthing therapy performed by her adoptive mother and a group of unlicensed therapists in 2000. While Petscop isn't about what happened to her, it does contain several references to her case, though Tony later said that he regretted including these, as in hindsight it felt a little inappropriate, which, yeah, maybe a little. Tony has said that he has always preferred horror that is more subtle and ambiguous, but felt that most popular works of horror fiction were the opposite of that. According to him, there is an explanation for everything that happens in the story, but he purposely left much of it out of what we see in the episodes. By leaving things vague, he wanted viewers to interpret it based on their own experiences. Of course, this left people foaming at the mouth to come up with theories, and videos on the series from big YouTubers like Nexpo, MatPat, Pyrocynical, and Wendigoon spurred its popularity even further. The penultimate analog horror series we will be covering today is the Mandela Catalogue, created in 2021 by Alex Kister, who, like Stephen Chamberlain of No Through Road, was only a teenager at the time. He initially created the first episode as a one-off video based on a high school writing project, but after it gained popularity on YouTube, decided to develop it into a full series, which is still ongoing to this day. While the Mandela Catalogue could be considered found footage for the most part, it doesn't focus on just one type of found footage like all the previous analog horror series we've discussed. Rather, it blends several different types of found footage together, sometimes in the same episode, including camera footage, computer screen recordings, VHS tapes, CCTV footage, and more. The story takes place in the fictional Mandela County, Wisconsin, at different points in time throughout the 90s and 2000s. The county has been plagued by mass suicides and child abductions, leading to a drastic reduction in the population. The cause of this is an invasion of beings known as alternates, supernatural doppelgangers that can manipulate audiovisual media to enter our world, steal away children, and psychologically torment their victims until they take their own lives. The series follows a cast of characters who have each been affected by and are investigating the alternate invasion in some way. It also heavily features religious themes and Christian iconography. It's widely theorized that the alternates are demons sent to Earth by Satan, who has disguised himself as the Archangel Gabriel. Alex Kister has stated that his ideas for the Mandela Catalogue came about during the pandemic lockdowns, when he, like the rest of us, was trapped in his childhood home and going through an existential crisis. The outside world was no longer safe, and old childhood fears, of the dark, of an intruder, of yourself, started resurfacing. influencing the type of horror that is prevalent throughout the Mandela Catalogue. The influence of Local 58 can also particularly be felt. This series too became extremely popular, especially the PSA segments that inform the public how to identify and deal with alternates. If you haven't seen one of these before, odds are you've at least seen a parody or meme of it somewhere. I'd say it was the most mainstream attention an analog horror series had ever gotten up to that point. Alex Kister's channel has over 1 million subscribers, the series has been covered in several publications, and a whole fandom sprung up around it. Alex seemed to readily embrace the internet horror community and engage with fans of the series, but in hindsight, it may have been better if he had taken a leaf out of Tony Domenico's book. In 2024, an ex-partner of Alex's came forward to accuse him of inappropriate conduct towards themselves and some fans in his Discord server. In response to this, several of his collaborators on the Mandela Catalogue cut ties with him, and a VHS release of Volume 1 of the series was cancelled. Alex later denied all of these allegations and continued to produce new episodes. Whether or not you believe him is up to you, you can do your own research, I'm not going to get too deep into it here, but I will say to any other aspiring content creators out there, speaking from experience, do not be in Discord servers with your fans, it's just not a good idea for multiple reasons. While the Mandela Catalogue certainly still has its fans, its popularity has taken a notable hit following this incident. That being said, it was definitely influential enough to inspire many imitators. The Backrooms is the other analog horror series that was directly based off a creepypasta. If you've been online at all in the past 5 or so years, you have to have heard of the Backrooms, or seen this picture floating around somewhere. While this image has been on the internet for many years now, the creepypasta connected to it came about when it was posted on 4chan's Xboard in 2019 in a thread about disquieting images that just feel off. Another user captioned the image as follows: "If you're not careful and you no-clip out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the Backrooms, where it's nothing but the stink of old moist carpet, the madness of mono yellow, the endless background noise of fluorescent lights at maximum hum buzz, and approximately 600 million square miles of randomly segmented empty rooms to be trapped in. God save you if you hear something wandering around nearby, because it sure as hell has heard you." From there, the image and caption spread around the rest of the internet like a black mold infestation. It became popular with liminal space enthusiasts, lost media enthusiasts, who track the real-life location of the photo down to a former furniture store in Wisconsin, and internet horror enthusiasts, who, similar to Slender Man, created a whole community around it that began expanding upon its lore. The Backrooms creepypasta also captured the attention of then 16-year-old Kane Parsons, who went by Kane Pixels online. A self-taught Blender user, he decided to see if he could recreate the Backrooms as a 3D model, leading to him releasing a short film titled The Backrooms Found Footage in 2022. He soon decided to develop it into a full series that has 22 episodes to date. The first episode takes place in 1991 and follows a cameraman who trips during a film shoot and no-clips through the ground, falling into the backrooms. He wanders through the seemingly endless maze of liminal spaces, quickly realizing that he is not alone. Some sort of creature pursues him until he reaches a dead end. It grabs him, and we hear his screams as the camera falls down a hole and back into the real world. The remainder of the series focuses on a fictional research institute called Async that has discovered the Backrooms, referred to as the Complex in this series, and is attempting to study and document them, despite their many dangers. Kane Pixels has said that he was unaware of the wider Backrooms fandom and lore prior to beginning his series, and just happened to come up with the idea for different levels of the Backrooms based on different popular liminal space images, a concept already popular within the fandom, coincidentally. He felt drawn to the Backrooms photo because it gave him the same hazy feeling of nostalgia he felt when looking at family photos from the 2000s. Quote, "The flash is always on, the lighting is gross looking, there's yellow walls, the white balance is all off," end quote. He initially only used Blender and Adobe After Effects to create the series, but later episodes upped the production value, even utilizing things like motion capture technology. The Backrooms series ended up surpassing the popularity of even the Mandela Catalogue. The first video has 68 million views, and Kane's channel has over 2 million subscribers. He even won a Streamy Award in 2022 for his work on the series. In 2023, it was announced that, like Marvel Hornets, the Backrooms would receive a feature film adaptation to be produced by A24. Given how the Marvel Hornets movie turned out, many were wary of this. However, the movie is set to be directed by Kane himself, which is kind of crazy given how young he is, but hopefully this means the film won't stray too far away from what fans like about the web series. What goes up must come down, as they say, but is this true for the analog horror genre? Analog horror rose to prominence throughout the 2010s and reached the peak of its popularity by the early 2020s. This sounds great on paper, but in practice I find when something really starts to enter the public consciousness, that's when we start to see a backlash against it, whether it's warranted or not. One recurring point of criticism was that every analog horror series seemed to use the same handful of tropes over and over again, and they were becoming a bit tired. This was a critique that was leveled at the Mandela Catalogue in particular. You can really tell when the culture has turned on a once popular thing when there starts being 1,000,001 memes mocking it. The Exhibit A, this tweet. I will give Alex Kister credit though, in that he took these criticisms in stride, even creating a parody video of the Mandela Catalogue called the Scrimblow Catalogue, and using the feedback to improve the series, adding more digital and abstract elements to it. Another common criticism is that some newer analog horror series appear to misunderstand what it is that makes analog horror scary. As I've mentioned, a lot of the horror in analog horror comes not from jump scares or gore, but from more subtle and psychological elements, like the fear of the unknown and the building of tension. This is a problem that I kind of have with the Backrooms. The concept of being trapped alone in a never-ending parallel dimension of unsettling spaces is scary enough that I don't think the inclusion of a monster is really necessary. If anything, I feel like it detracts from it and feels, dare I say, a tad corny. And this is no shade whatsoever to Kane Parsons or any Backrooms enjoyers out there. There are plenty of things I think the Backrooms does well, this is just my own personal opinion. I know the original creepypasta did allude to some sort of creature, but I don't think that's the part of the creepypasta that people found, well, creepy. And finally, due to the popularity of analog horror and the relatively low barrier to entry for creating a series, the genre has become a bit oversaturated with projects that can vary wildly in quality. With the reliance on the same set of tropes, there is little to set these series apart from one another, especially the ones that clearly have not had much effort put into them. As with any creative trend that is popular and accessible, some people will inevitably view it as a sort of get-rich-quick scheme. We're seeing this right now with the video essay format on this platform, leading to a lot of, as the kids would say, slop. Just because you can upload 10-hour-long videos on here now doesn't mean you should. One analog horror series that I think exemplifies this is Urban Spook. Normally I wouldn't call out a specific series and be like, this is bad, but the guy who makes it kind of sucks, so I don't care. Apparently he doesn't take too well to criticism, but frankly, he can die mad about it. Instead of thoughtfully using analog aesthetics to curate an unnerving atmosphere, Urban Spook relies on shock value in a way that is honestly just distasteful, including extremely graphic descriptions of horrific murders and assaults that include children and animals as the victims. The analog aesthetic also isn't used in a way that adds anything to the story or even makes any sense. The videos are presented as police reports, but why would police reports be on VHS tapes with, like, spooky background music? We don't even get to see anything happen. Literally every video is just a description of a gruesome crime scene with a few images. It's just like that one TikTok sound that's like, her arms were cut off, her legs were cut off, her eyes were plucked out.
Her arms were cut off, her legs were cut off, her ears were cut off, her tongue was cut off, her nose was cut off, her eyeballs were plucked out, her eyebrows were then waxed.
Like, I'm sorry, but Jeff the Killer had better storytelling. Whatever happened to show don't tell? It just feels like you're making fodder for reaction streamers at that point. All that being said, do I think analog horror is dead? No. There is still plenty of good analog horror being made, you may just have to dig a little deeper for it. The genre is also starting to expand offline, with recent Hollywood horror movies like Late Night with the Devil and Skinamarink taking cues from it. Again, neither of which I've seen, but I've heard good things. And I think digital horror has a huge potential as an offshoot genre of analog horror. Again, check out my June Archive video. Overall, I think there is still room for innovation in analog horror, and I'm excited to see where the genre goes. What do you think? Is analog horror dead? What are your favorite underrated analog horror series? Drop your thoughts down in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, liking, subscribing, and sharing are all hugely appreciated. Have a happy Halloween, and I'll catch y'all in the next one.